William Carter had always been a skeptic. Growing up in a small town in Georgia, he had heard all sorts of ghost stories and urban legends. Among these tales, the legend of Blackwood Hollow was the most terrifying. It was said that the forest was cursed, haunted by an ancient evil that preyed on anyone who dared to enter its depths. Whispers of ghostly apparitions, mysterious disappearances, and a malevolent presence that lurked in the shadows had circulated for generations. William, a man of science and logic, dismissed these stories as mere superstitions. He was a rational thinker, a professor of physics at a local university, and he believed that every phenomenon had a logical explanation. But all that changed when he experienced the horrors of Blackwood Hollow firsthand. It was a crisp autumn evening, and William had just celebrated his 40th birthday. His friends, Mark, John, and Sam, decided to go hunting near Blackwood Hollow, a tradition they had kept for years. The forest was dense, its trees towering and ominous, their branches intertwining like skeletal fingers. As the sun dipped below the horizon, the forest seemed to come alive with eerie noises and unsettling shadows. Separated from his group, William felt a cold shiver run down his spine. He heard whispers, faint at first, then growing louder, calling his name in a chilling, ethereal voice. His flashlight flickered, casting eerie shadows that danced among the trees. In its dim light, he saw a figure standing just beyond the reach of the beam. A tall, shadowy silhouette with glowing red eyes that seemed to pierce through the darkness. Paralyzed with fear, William watched as the figure slowly approached. Its movements were deliberate, almost methodical, as if savoring his terror. Just as it reached out to him, the flashlight died, plunging him into impenetrable darkness. Panic surged through him, and he stumbled backward, tripping over a root and falling to the ground. When he managed to reignite the light, the figure was gone. Trembling, he rushed back to his friends, breathless and shaken, but they found nothing unusual. They laughed it off as a trick of the light, but William knew what he had seen. It was no mere illusion. 15 years later, William had almost convinced himself that his encounter was a product of an overactive imagination. He had built a successful career, had a loving family, and had put the terrifying experience behind him. But on a stormy night, while driving home from a business trip, his car broke down near Blackwood Hollow. Stranded and without cell service, he sought refuge in an abandoned cabin he remembered from his youth. The rain pounded on the roof, and the wind howled through the cracks in the walls. As he sat by the fireplace trying to keep warm, he heard footsteps outside. The sound was faint at first, then grew louder, echoing through the cabin. Peering through the window, he saw nothing but darkness. Then, the door creaked open, and a cold breeze swept through the room. Standing in the doorway was the same shadowy figure, now more defined, its eyes burning brighter than before. It whispered his name, the sound chilling him to the bone. William backed away, but the figure advanced, its presence overwhelming and suffocating. It seemed to glide across the floor, leaving a trail of icy air in its wake. Suddenly, the figure lunged at him, and William stumbled, hitting his head against the wall. Stars exploded in his vision, and he felt a searing pain shoot through his body. When he regained consciousness, the figure was gone, and the storm had passed. The cabin was eerily silent, and a sense of dread lingered in the air. He left the cabin in a hurry, vowing never to speak of the incident. At 59, William had become a recluse, haunted by his past encounters. His once vibrant life was now filled with fear and paranoia. He spent countless hours researching the history of Blackwood Hollow, uncovering tales of witches, rituals, and a curse that dated back centuries. The deeper he delved, the more convinced he became that the entity was real, and it had marked him. Determined to end the terror, William decided to confront the entity once and for all. Armed with everything he had learned, he ventured into the heart of Blackwood Hollow on a moonless night. The forest was silent, the air thick with an oppressive darkness. The trees loomed overhead, their branches intertwining to form a canopy that blocked out the sky. The ground was soft and damp, muffling his footsteps as he walked deeper into the woods. As he reached a clearing, the temperature dropped and the familiar whispers returned. The hairs on the back of his neck stood up, and his breath turned to mist in the frigid air. The shadowy figure emerged from the darkness, more menacing than ever. Its eyes glowed with a malevolent intensity, and its presence filled him with an overwhelming sense of dread. William stood his ground, chanting ancient incantations he had discovered in his research. The figure paused, seemingly affected by his words, but then it began to laugh, a deep, guttural sound that echoed through the trees. The ground trembled, and the air filled with a foul stench. The figure's eyes blazed with fury, and it lunged at William, knocking him to the ground. Pain shot through his body as the figure's icy grip tightened around his throat. Gasping for breath, William fought to free himself, but the entity's strength was overwhelming. In a final desperate act, he reached into his bag and pulled out a vial of holy water, smashing it against the figure's chest. A blinding light erupted, and the figure let out a blood-curdling scream, releasing its hold on William. The light intensified, enveloping the entity until it vanished, leaving behind a smoldering patch of earth. Exhausted and battered, William collapsed, the whispers fading into silence. William was found the next morning by a group of hikers, unconscious but alive. He was taken to the hospital, where he spent weeks recovering. The doctors were baffled by his injuries, unable to explain the severe frostbite on his neck and chest. His family and friends visited, but he struggled to explain what had happened. He knew they wouldn't believe the truth. Despite the physical and emotional scars, William felt a strange sense of peace. He had faced his fears and survived. The legend of Blackwood Hollow remained, but the sightings of the shadowy figure ceased. William never returned to the forest, but the memories of his encounters haunted him until his final days. He shared his story with those who would listen, warning them of the darkness that lurked in Blackwood Hollow. Some believed him, while others dismissed his tale as the ravings of a madman. But William knew the truth. He had confronted an ancient evil and lived to tell the tale. And so the legend of Blackwood Hollow lived on, a terrifying urban legend that continued to send shivers down the spines of those who dared to venture near. The forest remained a place of mystery and fear, its secrets buried deep within its dark, tangled heart.